Okay, so I know this is probably a lot of stuff on the screen that doesn't make sense. I'm going to start off with the Dow just to make this a little bit easier to understand and follow. So this is the Dow Industrial Average. It's one of the largest indexes. Well, it is the largest index in the stock market. There's over 100 years of history. Bottom left-hand corner, 1897, 2024, far right-hand side. And so I want to kind of walk you through how to really look at this. When we look at this, there's a theory, or not a theory, more so an actually proven theory by Dr. Elliot. He was a great mathematician back in the Great Depression times. He essentially plotted out using the Fibonacci equation, which is similar to pi. Essentially, as a pi sum never solves, it just keeps on going and going and going, 3.14, and as much as you can remember as far as memory goes. Fibonacci equation is the same way. 1 plus 1 is 2. What comes after 1, 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. What comes after 2, 3. And that goes on infinitely. If we measure from the peak to the valley, or essentially from the top to the bottom, or the 100 to the 0 level, I'm just going to make sure I've got these on here correctly, it will then plot out exactly where we're going to fall in history going forward. The only thing is not if, it's a matter of when. And so if you notice on here, just measuring in the Great Depression that essentially peak to valley, every time we get to our ceilings of resistance, you notice that there's a major point of contestation in most cases. They also act like lines or support levels as well. So once you break above it, it can act as a support as it does right here, same thing right here, same thing right here, same thing right here. And at the moment, we are getting to our next ceiling of resistance. Now, it's probably pretty hard to see it as far as ceiling of resistance at the current time because there's no line there. You're not really supposed to measure back 100 years. It is something that's supposed to be measured on each crash or each peak and valley. So if we measure essentially back in 2020 down to essentially what COVID was, well, now you notice that we have a ceiling of resistance and we're perfectly hitting it right there. I mean, I'm not sure if you could draw it any closer if you tried. It's just the math, but that is pretty spot on if you would ask my opinion. But nonetheless, this is kind of one of the things, well, not kind of, this is one of the tools that we look at when we're looking at interest rates. So if we jump back to the, that's unemployment, sorry. If we jump back to the interest rates, I'm going to clear everything off here just for a quick second. So when rates were up here, I'm sorry, the Treasury bond was up here. This is when rates were at 2 and 3%. We have fallen about 500 to 600 basis points in a downward motion, essentially from that top all the way down to here. So I'm putting everything back on here for a second, and then this should now make a little bit more sense. So all the lines, regardless of what color that they are, this is essentially showing ceilings of resistance and supports. And getting more closely up to this point right here, you can see that we've been trying to get over this ceiling and we have been failing to do so. Now the white dotted gray line, that isn't a ceiling of resistance, that's just measuring what our current price is. However, what is pretty important is it is measuring our current price, which happens to be where we got stuck at the other time we tried to break it. We did break it here, then it came down, tested it as support, fell through, sold off completely. Now we've been trying to retest and break, fail, rejected, and now we're trying to retest and break again. So what does that all translate to? Well, what it translates to is that this is probably the best we're going to see rates if we ultimately get rejected again. If we get rejected again, that's where this blue line comes into play. We'll likely come down here and test for support. This is where we were holding off last time. If we bounce off of that and do a retest and get rejected here, then it's just going to support further deterioration. That would make a lot of sense. And the reason why that would make a lot of sense is because essentially we are getting to the end of the Fed policy expiration for the end of the year. So your tax return, my tax return, they both end on 12/31. For the federal government, it is actually the end of September. That's usually when all the money policy, amongst other things, typically do a reset or a reposition and or a pivot. we are likely going to see that the interest rates on the Fed funds level is going to be dropped. The question is it going to be 25 basis points? Is it going to be 75 basis points? The reality of the matter is that it's already been priced into the market, and that's why we've seen interest rates drop here over the last couple of weeks. So the anticipation is high that it's going to be reducing. Now, why wouldn't it get reduced? What would be a reason for it that makes sense? Well, if we wanted to signal to the other central bank powers or the other first world powers, their currency and their banks, that the United States is still strong and resilient, that our economy is not crashing or going into a further recession or a deep recession, which would probably start hyperinflation, then we would probably either want to maintain our federal rate still, or we actually even might see a slight increase into that federal funds rate. Why would we see an increase? Well, the target was 2%. We're at 2.9. In addition to that, the targeted federal funds rate in general, actually, let me go back for a second. The inflation target was 2%. The targeted rate for the federal funds rate was at 5.875. We're at 5.5%. So we still have room that we could increase and be completely within what they set during the Jackson Hole. The Jackson Hole is the equivalent of the Super Bowl, but in the financial level. This is where all the central bank powers from all the other first world and or global powers come to the United States, listen to the keynote speaker, which is the Honorable Powell, who leads the Federal Reserve. Again, it would just be for simply the derivatives market, which is actually bigger than the stock market. It's bigger than the bond market. It's the largest financial asset class that exists globally. Valuation somewhere between 700 and 800 trillion. And that's a lot. The reason it's such a high valuation is a lot to do with depreciation of currency. But nonetheless, if we want to go ahead and keep on this marching parade per se, and where the dollar has really been a juggernaut compared to any other first world powers currency, and has really made it harder for foreign nations to repay their United States loans, that would be the reason to do it. That would be the way to do it. And quite frankly, the United States isn't quite there just yet to where it's at its breaking point, at least from a test from the financial markets. So what does all this mean for interest rates? Well, what this means for interest rates is, at the moment, they're pretty good for what they have been for the last couple of years, since May of 2022. Is it the best? No. I do think rates will get better. I do think rates will actually get lower. Will that happen within 6 months? Probably not. Could it? Very well so. I know that's kind of a yes and a no at the same time. The point is, the probability of it is, when you're looking at a no-cost refi, or you're looking at a purchase acquisition in general, the question really comes to play is, well, on a refinance side, can you break even within the first couple months? On the purchase side, is it going to cost more in inflation if I buy the house later? So those are the questions you want to be asking yourself. Insert the applicable, of course. The point is that rates will likely get better, but we very well may not see it till the middle of 2025, if not to the end of 25. I don't think you're going to see your lowest rates until we're at the end of 25, if not into the beginning of 2026.